When I signed the divorce papers, my ex-husband smiled like he'd just won the lottery. After 8 years of marriage, he walked away with our dream house, most of our savings, and the woman he'd been secretly dating for months. The judge granted us shared custody, but our 2-year-old son stayed with me most of the time. As I packed my clothes into cardboard boxes, he leaned against the doorway with a smug grin. "You'll never make it without me, Emily." I didn't answer. I simply picked up my baby, kissed his forehead, and walked out of the only home he'd ever known. That night, I cried until sunrise. I wasn't crying because I still loved my ex. I was crying because my son deserved better than a father who treated people like disposable furniture. The following weeks were brutal. I worked long shifts at a small medical clinic while my mother watched my son. Every dollar mattered. Some nights I skipped dinner so there'd be enough groceries for him. Meanwhile, social media painted a different picture. My ex posted luxury vacations, expensive dinners, and smiling selfies with his new girlfriend. His captions always hinted that he'd finally found happiness. Friends believed his version of the story. The abandoned husband. The difficult ex-wife. The fresh start. I stayed silent. Because I knew something he didn't. During our marriage, I'd quietly handled every financial document, every tax return, every business receipt, and every late-night phone call he asked me to take care of. I'd seen numbers that never made sense. Payments from accounts I'd never heard of. Cash deposits with no explanation. Invoices for projects that didn't exist. At first, I'd ignored the red flags because I trusted my husband. Now, I had nothing left to lose. As my son slept beside me in our tiny apartment, I opened my old laptop, plugged in a forgotten external hard drive, and stared at hundreds of files I'd backed up years earlier. One folder made my heart race. It was labeled only 3 words. "Don't delete ever." I clicked it. And within seconds, I realized my ex hadn't won the divorce. He had just handed me the evidence that could destroy everything he'd spent years building. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were years of spreadsheets, scanned contracts, emails, and bank statements. At first, it looked like ordinary business paperwork. Then I noticed the same 3 companies appearing over and over. Companies that existed only on paper. My ex had always insisted I organize his digital files because he hated paperwork. Without realizing it, I'd archived every receipt and every invoice he ever sent. One email changed everything. It showed him instructing a client to split a payment into 2 accounts. Another file listed thousands of dollars marked as consulting expenses that had never been spent. There were fake invoices, altered tax records, and transfers to an account that wasn't listed in our divorce disclosures. I wasn't a lawyer or an accountant, but I knew enough to understand one thing. He hadn't just lied to me. He had lied to the court. For days, I copied every file onto multiple encrypted drives. I refused to touch the originals. If this ever reached a courtroom, I wanted the evidence to speak for itself. Then something unexpected happened. His new girlfriend sent me a message. "Can we meet? There's something you deserve to know." I almost ignored it, assuming it was another attempt to humiliate me. Instead, we met at a quiet coffee shop. She looked exhausted. "I didn't know he was still married when we started dating," she whispered. "And now I'm afraid of him." She slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were printed bank transfers and photos of documents I'd never seen before. "I found these in his home office," she said. When I asked about them, he got angry. Really angry. As I compared her papers with the files from my hard drive, every piece fit together like a puzzle. The hidden accounts. The fake expenses. The missing money. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was the truth. And for the first time since the divorce, I smiled. Because I finally knew exactly how to make him face the consequences. The next morning, I stopped thinking like an angry ex-wife. I started thinking like a witness. Every document was organized by date, every email printed, every bank transfer matched to the corresponding invoice. I created a timeline showing exactly how the money had moved through different accounts over several years. Then I hired an experienced attorney. He spent nearly 3 hours reviewing the files without saying much. Finally, he closed the last folder and looked directly at me. "Emily, if these documents are authentic, this isn't just a divorce issue. This could have serious legal consequences." For the first time in months, I felt hope. My attorney advised me not to contact my ex or post anything online. Instead, we quietly submitted the financial records to the appropriate authorities and filed a motion asking the family court to review the assets disclosed during the divorce. Days turned into weeks. Then the phone calls started. His accountant resigned. One of his biggest business partners suddenly cut ties with him. Several clients delayed payments, saying they were reviewing ongoing concerns. Word was spreading, even though I hadn't said a single thing publicly. Late one evening, my phone rang. It was my ex. His confident voice was gone. "Emily, please tell me you didn't do this." I stayed calm. "I didn't create those records," I replied. "I only kept copies of the documents you asked me to organize." Silence. Then came the anger. He accused me of betrayal, threatened lawsuits, and demanded the files back. I simply ended the call. The next morning, I found flowers outside my apartment with a handwritten note. "We can fix this. Let's talk." Months earlier, I might have believed him. Now, I threw the note in the trash. Because this was never about revenge anymore. It was about protecting my son from a future built on lies. And as another legal notice arrived in my mailbox, I realized something. The man who once claimed I would never survive without him was now desperately trying to survive. Because of the truth I'd preserved. The court hearing arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the courtroom holding a single binder. Across the room, my ex sat beside an expensive legal team, still dressed in tailored suits, trying to project confidence. But I noticed something different. He wouldn't look me in the eye. When the proceedings began, my attorney presented the timeline we had carefully prepared. Every document matched a bank record. Every email supported a financial transaction. The judge asked detailed questions, and my ex struggled to explain why several accounts and business assets had never been disclosed during the divorce. His answers changed every few minutes. "I forgot. My accountant handled that. It was just a mistake." The excuses only made things worse. Then came the moment that changed everything. His former girlfriend, the woman who had met me at the coffee shop, took the witness stand. Calmly and clearly, she described finding financial records in his home office and explained how he became angry when she questioned them. She admitted she had once believed every lie he told, but she refused to help him hide the truth. The courtroom fell silent. The judge ordered an independent forensic review of the financial records and temporarily froze several disputed assets until the investigation was complete. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited for comments. I said only one sentence. "I'm here to protect my child and let the facts speak for themselves." Within days, the story spread through local business circles. Clients began canceling contracts. Investors distanced themselves. Friends who had once believed his version of the divorce quietly stopped calling him. Meanwhile, my life finally felt different. I picked up my son from daycare every evening, and for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the future. We laughed in our small apartment, made pancakes for dinner, and built pillow forts in the living room. Money couldn't buy that kind of peace. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. A certified letter arrived from the court. The forensic investigation was complete, and the judge's final decision would be announced in just 1 week. 1 week later, I returned to the courthouse for the final hearing. This time, my ex looked nothing like the confident man who had smirked when I signed the divorce papers months earlier. His expensive watch was gone. His lawyer barely spoke to him. The courtroom was quiet as the judge read the findings from the forensic investigation. The review confirmed that several financial assets and accounts had not been properly disclosed during the divorce proceedings. Because of those findings, the court ordered the property settlement to be reconsidered and adjusted based on the verified financial information. Additional legal matters related to the records would be handled through the appropriate process. The house he had fought so hard to keep was no longer the untouchable prize he believed it was. A significant portion of the previously hidden assets was taken into account, and I finally received the financial settlement that should have been disclosed from the beginning. Outside the courthouse, he tried to stop me. "Emily, please. We can start over. I'll fix everything." I looked at the man who once told me I'd never survive without him. Then I looked at my son, happily holding my hand. "I already fixed my life," I said. "I just did it without you." Months passed. I used the settlement to buy a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. My son had a backyard where he could run, laugh, and grow up surrounded by peace instead of arguments. I finished additional training at the medical clinic and earned a promotion, building a future through hard work rather than revenge. As for my ex, his reputation never fully recovered. Some friendships disappeared, several business opportunities vanished, and he had to face the consequences of his own decisions through the proper legal and professional channels. Looking back, I realized the greatest revenge wasn't seeing him lose everything. It was proving that he couldn't stop me from building a better life. The day he handed me those divorce papers, he thought he had written the ending of my story. He was wrong. He had only written the end of his chapter in my life. The next chapter belonged to me, and to the little boy, who taught me that real strength isn't found in anger. It's found in choosing truth, dignity, and a future no one can take away.